Put your hands together for Duncan Power, who's going to talk to us about the work of the Grameen Foundation.
With in developing world Asia, and we give these microloans to, I don't know, but I can bet 95% plus would squeeze from the bottom. Now, I better see if I can work the magic. I've got here a rag and a bar of soap. So in addition to the toothpaste, there's actually quite a lot of articles here. And I hope why I've got these here will become apparent very shortly. But I'd like to just start by a story. A little bit about me, I'm afraid, but just to say I'm a banker by background, a reformed banker, I call myself. I used to go into the centre of London with a suit, black tie or red tie and white shirt. And then one day I got the opportunity to hear at a seminar in London Professor Mohammed Yunus talk. And those of you who don't know who Professor Mohammed Yunus is, he's an inspiration, I believe, to all women in the developing world and beyond. He's one of the founding fathers of what we call microfinance, which is giving very small loans in the first instance to women for business purpose to help empower them and change the lives of their family. And after I'd heard this talk, I thought, well, I better go out and see what it's actually like on the ground. So I had a trip to the Philippines and went to a place called Northern Samar. It's part of an island, and it's in fact one of the 7 poorest provinces of the Philippines. And there I met an inspirational woman. She had been through what I could only describe as hell, and she'd come out the other side. She had an abusive husband who was an alcoholic. Her children, as well as herself, had been beaten. But when she spoke about her life, she cried, but actually cried with tears of joy. And she'd been given a chance to change her life through a very simple $150 loan. And this is how it happened. She went along to a group with other women, and a group of about 20 women got together with an NGO, and they put together a proposal to take on loans from this NGO. The NGO was sympathetic, and she ended up with $150 to build up a small, what they call sari-sari stores, grocery stores, just on the side of a road next to her house. And she had and got the respect of her husband, even despite the abuse, because she started to give not to the husband any money, but she actually gave money to the children so they could have school uniforms and send them back to school. And then from that story, she then said to the NGO, actually, I want $400. I can pay back. Look, I've paid back my loan, and I deserve a bigger loan. So what she did, she bought her husband a little tricycle. Now, those of you who have been through the Philippines will know these tricycles. You pedal them along. They have a little cab on the side, and it's like a taxi in these local rural communities. And at the same time, she managed to get help for her husband and his alcohol problem. And for the first time in many years, her husband worked, and she'd been the instigator of it. He went and pedaled his cycle around and got money for the family. that gave him a certain self-respect that he hadn't had for a long time. As a result, and 2 years on when I met her, her tears and joy actually helped to change my life. And I started to work again with these, again in banking, but in quite a different sort of banking for the poor. Mohammed Yunus will be in Sydney in October, and I'd really encourage you to attend one of his lectures. He's a truly inspiring man. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. He started by trusting women because he saw that they were the underclass in Bangladesh. He was a university professor in economics at the time, and what he did was he actually started by just giving 2 loans of $15 each, and the women paid him back. And so he began there to think about how he could get banks involved. And the banks in Bangladesh laughed at him. They said, "We can't make loans to women, they won't repay." And of course it's one of these false assumptions that so many men in the developing world and perhaps developed world have. Professor Mohammed Yunus proved them wrong. And today, Grameen Bank, which he founded in Bangladesh, has over 10 million clients. Almost all of them are women, and they have 98% over many, many years repayment rate of the loans. I would hazard a guess that if the bank had been made to give loans to men, it would have been less than 50%. The women are the responsible citizens, so much so, my experience in the developing world, and that's over all cultural and religious boundaries, whether it's with Muslim people, Christian people, Buddhist people, Hindu people, the women are responsible. As well as making these small loans, Professor Mohammed Yunus came up with the thought of setting up what I call social businesses. And the idea of a social business is that it's a business activity that generates a profit, but the profit goes to support very underprivileged people. And in the way we work with our microfinance and with our women, that's all right, we very much encourage them to create what we call small social, micro-social businesses. What we want to do is increase the money within the communities, in the deprived communities where these women work, and we'll mentor, we'll help, we'll guide, but we'll support the women becoming true entrepreneurs, and we want them to be social entrepreneurs. And in this way, to set up businesses that have an export value out of that community or provide an import replacement. And we do that specifically because what we found with some microfinance loan programs, that the money in the community doesn't get any bigger, even though our borrowers do very well. So we actually need more. So that's why we come up with the idea of selling rags, selling soap, selling peanut butter, selling beautiful bedding or clothes, or sometimes it can be even as simple as a metalwork business. And the whole family and other employees can get involved as well. But really the brains and the entrepreneurship behind it is usually the woman. One of the places we work is Manila. And in Manila, you have about 25% of the population are in abject poverty and living in informal settlements. And we've brought in a particular type of microfinance into the very deprived urban settlements. Traditionally, microfinance has worked well in rural areas and in urban areas, but at the next level up, we're bringing it into homeless communities, and with the anticipation that the women in these very, very poorest of situations will be as reliable as their counterparts in the rural areas. Actually, so far, we've been proved right. The issues are somewhat different. Sometimes their homes the police come in, and suddenly their homes are basically taken away from them because they're basically living in squatter communities. Sometimes they're taken to the outskirts of the city, into another environment, and given a little bit of money, but actually no job security. So part of our work is to go into these new settlements and create work. And it's the women entrepreneurs who take this up, who we've trained within these very poor urban backgrounds. We also work in Cambodia. And in Cambodia in particular, we work on the rubbish dumps. And children and young women will start work often as early as 6 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes they won't finish work till midnight, and they're collecting pieces of plastic. They're collecting anything that's recyclable that they can put in a sack, and it gets sold on to a distributor. And they earn between 75 cents and $2.50 a day, depending on how diligent and hard-working they are, and depending on how many garbage trucks happen to come in. This is all happening within 22 kilometers of Angkor Wat, and one of the biggest tourist destinations in Southeast Asia. And the wealth coming into the city is not touching many of those who are needed. So what we've done is taken women out of that environment, and we've started a chicken farm. We've started a chicken farm as a training centre to teach them poultry management skills, with the aim that they'll have their own poultry farm, selling chickens into the tourist market in Siem Reap. And I'd like to share with you just a couple of brief case studies of women who's, again, come from extremely deprived circumstances and whose lives have been empowered by just a small program that we've been able to establish. This girl's name's Sal. She's 17 years old. She left school when she was 11 to work on the rubbish dump. You can see in the picture on her right, on the left-hand side, she's actually only got, right-hand side actually on the screen, sorry. She's only got one eye. Her eye was poked out when she was 7 years old. She's got a father who's extremely abusive. She can't go home. Her brothers and sisters have been abused in ways that are really just horrific. And yet, Sal is a very bright, intelligent young woman. She can't read or write, even the local Khmer language, but when you talk to her through an interpreter, you realize just what her potential is. And her aspirations, despite the background she's come to, are actually the same as aspirations of any young people who would come out of Barker College in Sydney. It's the wonderful thing about working with people from poor backgrounds and in the developing world, they're actually no different. And that's been such a revelation to me, with leaving the big banking world and finding out that actually for a very small amount of money, we can really change young women's lives and give them an education, give them a vocational training. And with Sal, we've actually given her a new eye as well, albeit it's an artificial eye, as you can see in the picture on the left. She works part-time now on our chicken farm. She earns more than she did on the rubbish dump doing that. She gets an apprenticeship, but most